my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation.
President Trump, you saw him live here just a short time ago at the National Prayer Breakfast, calling out his opponents in the wake of his acquittal at the impeachment trial.
Meanwhile, the president is set to speak again just under 2 hours from now from the East Room of the White House, noon Eastern time. Here with reaction ahead of that is today's headliner, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham. Stephanie, good morning and thanks for being here.
Good morning.
What will we hear from the president when he speaks at noon?
You know, I think that I'm not going to get too far ahead of him, but he gave a little preview this morning at the prayer breakfast. He's going to be honest. He's going to speak to the country with honesty, and I think with a little bit of humility that he and the family went through a lot. He and this country went through a lot. He's glad it's over. He'll certainly talk about that, but I think he's going to also talk about just how horribly he was treated, and that maybe people should pay for that.
Stephanie, when you say the president's glad it's over, on the other hand, it doesn't sound to us like it's over, because Democrats like Jerry Nadler are saying they're already with subpoenas for folks like John Bolton. Even though there's been an acquittal, they say the investigation goes on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I actually went to bed last night thinking, I wonder if this is going to be over or if they're going to continue on with their antics. And we're certainly prepared for that. This has been going on since the day the president went down the escalator, unfortunately. So we're prepared for them to continue to try to hurt the president rather than try to help the country. The president, meanwhile, will continue to help the country. He travels tomorrow to do some things with opportunity zones. He stays focused, and that's just how it'll go.
I just heard you say that when people don't do what is right, they'll pay for that. The president seemed to target Nancy Pelosi without naming her at that prayer breakfast this morning, saying that he would be discussing a little bit more as to what is next at noon today. Here's a bit of what he said about Nancy Pelosi.
Nor do I like people who say, I pray for you, when they know that that's not so. So many people have been hurt, and we can't let that go on. And I'll be discussing that a little bit later at the White House.
So what is the president suggesting there, Stephanie?
People should be held accountable. The Democrats should be held accountable for not only what they did to the president and to his family and the administration, but the country. People need to understand what the Democrats did was dishonest, and it was corrupt, and it had no other motive than to take him out in 2020. People should be held accountable for anything they do to try to hurt this country and this president.
So, and in terms of accountability, there were Republicans, as you know, like Kevin McCarthy, calling for some sort of an ethics investigation or something about Nancy Pelosi ripping up the pieces of paper. I think Matt Gaetz was even suggesting it was criminal. Is the president going to go after Nancy Pelosi over that? What's his reaction to her ripping that up?
Well, I don't think he has to go after her any more than, the public sees what she did there. And, as our polls continue to go up, they just continue to go lower and lower. And that act that she did was, just an example of that. She didn't just tear up some papers. She tore up a speech that had American heroes in it. She tore up a speech that had a vision for our country in it. And what's worse, she had the speech pre-torn before she stood up to do it. So, she needs to be held accountable for that. There are more important things going on than these silly little childish antics that they continue to pull.
Meanwhile, here is Chuck Schumer on the president's acquittal, talking about there will always be an asterisk next to it.
And now that our Republican colleagues have rejected a fair trial, truth, there's a giant asterisk next to the president's acquittal. The asterisk says he was acquitted without facts, he was acquitted without a fair trial, and it means that his acquittal is virtually valueless.
Even the House manager, Stephanie, a piece in the Washington Post, Jerry Nadler, Adam Schiff, and others, writing this: Trump won't be vindicated. The Senate won't be either. They write about the American people being denied a fair trial in the Senate. How does the White House respond?
It's amazing to me that they forget that the president was denied any fair due process, starting with the House, starting with Nancy Pelosi. This is them being sore losers, plain and simple. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but they're being sore losers. The story is today the president is not guilty. The story is today that the president was acquitted of something he didn't actually do. They are being sore losers. They are not sure what to do now. They're going to probably try to concoct some new scheme, new scandal, but until then, they're going to be sore losers. There's no asterisk there. The only asterisk is what a successful president we have.
Stephanie, the president also took a shot at Mitt Romney, using his faith to say it was something that guided him in voting to convict the president on one of the articles. How disappointed are you that this was not a quote-unquote bipartisan acquittal, as some around the president had been pushing for, in the sense you didn't get any Democrats to vote to acquit and you had one Republican who was voting yes?
Certainly, I was disappointed, but sadly, I wasn't surprised. And if you put party aside, if you even put religion aside, I just had to wonder, was Mitt Romney even listening? Because if he was listening, he would not have voted that way. The president did absolutely nothing wrong. And look, I'm old enough to remember when Mitt Romney was doing all he could to become Secretary of State. I was there when he met with the president at Bedminster. I was there when he went out to dinner with him in New York. I remember when he wanted to be Secretary of State. So just like in 1994 and all the time since, I think that he is flip-flopping. I think he's bitter that he's not president, and I think he hates to see that the president has enacted all the things he wanted to do.
But Stephanie, the flip side of that is that the president seriously considered Mitt Romney. Was that a mistake to even consider him for Secretary of State? When you say he went through all that, Romney wanted the job, but the president was talking to him about it.
Well, the president talked to many, many people for many, many positions. I mean, we were in the transition, so that's a natural thing to do.
Hey, Stephanie, before we let you go, it was fascinating for many to watch Nancy Pelosi stand up for the president this morning ahead of his speech at the prayer breakfast, and even she applauded along with everyone else, a standing ovation there. I don't believe we all ever saw Nancy Pelosi and the president interact or handshake. But the president talked about redemption, and he talked about reconciliation and forgiveness at the prayer breakfast. Does he have any plans to reconcile his relationship with Nancy Pelosi?
You know, I think he mentioned in there that he's going to try his hardest, but that it is difficult when somebody has been out to try to ruin your reputation and your political career. That's going to be difficult to do. The president hasn't stopped trying to work with Democrats on the other side, even as they've been putting him through this. I mean, that is how USMCA got passed. So I think he will continue to forge ahead for the country and try to get work done.
Some have suggested that Nancy Pelosi should, at a minimum, apologize for ripping up that speech. We might hear from her a few minutes from now. If she were to do that, would the president accept that apology?
I think she absolutely should apologize for that, but she should also be apologizing for what she's done to the country for the past few months. So until she does that, I'm not sure we're going to accept any apologies.
Stephanie Grisham, the White House press secretary, we certainly appreciate you coming in and being our headliner today. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Thank you, guys.